Hi, everybody. Steve Paikin here on the fourth floor of 2180 Yonge Street in Midtown Toronto, wanting to introduce you to Chris Kobrak. Chris is a professor of the Wilson Curry Chair of Canadian Business and Financial History at the Rotman School of Management at U of T. He's also a professor of finance at ESCP Europe in Paris, where he was last Friday night, the 13th of November. Chris, I'm glad to see you again, and well, let's just get into the story right away. Why were you in Paris last Friday night?
As usual, it's good to see you, Steve. I wasn't teaching a finance class in the Stade de France. I was with my family. One of my stepsons had a birthday, and I took him and another stepson and some friends out to the Stade de France, and unfortunately was not in a good place for Friday evening. That was a picture taken by my stepson Francois, which he sent to me, of a time when things were relatively calm.
How many minutes after he took this picture did things change?
It must have been after this. I'm not exactly sure when he took the picture, but we started, I first got a phone call from a friend who lives in my building who said that as you know, I live very close to the Bataclan, the club where the 80 people were killed, and she told me that there were things going on in the 10th and the 11th, to be very careful coming home. That's all. At that point, she said. She called back 15 minutes later to say that the Stade de France had been closed, and that we were all enclosed inside, that she didn't know anymore. She's a journalist. Was getting some reports. I got up to check with the usher, and indeed the stadium had been closed, and we couldn't get out, and I decided not to alert the family yet. At one point, I guess a few minutes later, I began to see families leaving with small children, and I think what was happening, still don't know. We had heard the explosions. We didn't know what the cause was, but I drew the inference that people were also getting phone calls and had heard that they could leave with the small children. So at that point, I went down to my stepsons, their wives, and to my friends who were there, and I said, I think we ought to leave. And I explained to them when we got to the back of the stadium what had happened, and I had been told by that point that that they had opened up one exit, and we walked as quickly as we could to that exit, which was about halfway around the stadium. As you're looking at that picture, as I look at it, is to the right where we had to go.
And how were people conducting themselves, Chris, as they were leaving the stadium?
Were they talking to one another?
Well, I guess I'm trying to find out, were people panicking, or were they moving in an orderly fashion?
There was no panic that I saw. At this point, not everyone was leaving. There were a fair number of people leaving, as I say, especially people with young children. Lots of people stayed in the stands. And those people who were not getting phone calls, there was absolutely no announcement at the stadium. So unless you were getting phone calls from outside telling you what was going on, you did not know. Obviously the two explosions we heard were kind of disconcerting, but we thought perhaps that they were some people with very large firecrackers. As it turned out, the two explosions, the first two, were right at the entrance where my stepsons, their wives, and my friends and I had come into the stadium. We're very, very lucky, actually, that the people who did this terrible thing were, because of their ambition to cause panic in the stadium, they actually killed far fewer people than they might have. Because a half an hour before the game, at the entrance, there was a lot of control. We were searched, people looked in bags, so there were perhaps 200 people at the entrance, just standing in front of the entrance. If they had ignited the bombs at that point, they would have killed 200 people. What they did was they waited until the game started in hopes that they could get in, ignite the bombs in the stadium, causing panic in the stadium. So in some sense, that ambition that they had saved the lives of hundreds of people, and I and my family were probably among those lives.
Well,
So we
let's see
ended
if
up.
we can do a time lapse here. From the time you entered by that gate,
Yeah.
where the terrorists eventually blew themselves up, how much time difference would you say?
Okay. We entered at 8:30. The game began at 9. My recollection is the first two explosions were around 9:20.
Hmm.
The phone call that I got was maybe about 9:40. First one. The second, actually, we had a third phone call. Those were about 9:50, 10 o'clock. It was at the right around the halftime that I began asking the ushers for information about what was going on. So it was it was around 9:50, 10 o'clock. I mean, 45 minutes for the first half. So it was about 9:49, 9:50 before. Yeah.
And what time? At what point do you start to realize, oh my God, I cheated death by about an hour here?
Uh, we Well, that's a very good question. When did we realized something horrible had happened by the time we got out of the stadium? That they actually blew up the bombs right at the entrance where we came in. I think we found that out as I slept over my stepson's because I could not go back home. We were watching the news, and I think they said that it was entrance G and H, which is where we came in. So I believe the first time we realized that it was right where we entered was maybe 12:30, 1 o'clock at night.
Was there another attack near your home?
Oh yeah, the worst death toll was at the club, the Bataclan, which was 120 meters from my house. And that's why, actually, my neighbor had called. I mean, it was not that attack, but there were attacks in the whole neighborhood. But the worst attack, finally, the last one that they did, was 120 meters away, and that's why I couldn't get home because, in fact, until 1 o'clock they were battling with these people, and the police, I don't think, were letting anyone back. I certainly didn't want to take the chance. The metro was closed. We tried around 1:30. It was a wonderful thing in Paris. But at 1:30, Francois started to call taxis. Couldn't get a taxi. I would have tried to get it home then. The taxis had announced that they were going to take people anywhere they wanted to go for free, and which is a wonderful gesture. Except it became impossible to get a taxi at the point. You can imagine.
So how did you eventually get home?
The next morning, I took a taxi and went home. I stayed at Francois and his wife's apartment, which is near Gare du Nord, and then headed home in the morning.
Chris, I want to ask you about, just finally, what you think. I mean, first of all, congratulations. Very good that you are safe. And,
Thank you.
I
would say, as a colleague said to me, I'm either the luckiest person or the most unlucky person in the world. I like to think the luckiest.
Well, you're alive, so you're definitely go for luckiest. But I'm wondering, a few days after the fact now, what do you think the world should do about all this?
Ooh, I think we have to get very, very serious and recognize that there are lots of people in the world who want to destroy our values that I believe very strongly in, and that we recognize that we're going to have to make some compromises with our freedom. In an emergency situations, people have to take measures that, if it were not an emergency, they shouldn't do. And I think the time has stopped now that we can draw lines absolutely and say it is always wrong for the police to monitor the telephone conversations of people the way the NSA has been doing it. I think we have to do some of these measures. I think we live in a good, strong, liberal democracy. When I say we, I mean Canada, the United States, Western Europe. I think we have enough checks on what the government can do. And look, my credit card company knows all sorts of things about me. If the government needs to take certain measures to monitor people's movements and their conversations, if people are regularly communicating with Syria, I think we have to follow that. So where the compromise, where the line is, I don't know, but we have to take these things much more seriously than we have.
Understood. Chris, be well, and thanks for doing this.
Thank you.